If I could have the members' attention, hold the conversations down. I'd like to recognize, under unanimous consent, Representative Gillen relative to House Resolution 22, which was just adopted. Gentlemen's in order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This morning, while I was driving in to Harrisburg, I heard a tragic news story regarding a tsunami that occurred in the South Pacific in the Solomon Islands. 70 years ago, there was another tsunami that arrived in the Solomons beginning in August of 1942 and enduring on Guadalcanal till February the 9th, 1943. And if I could invoke the spirit of Winston Churchill, the men of Guadalcanal vowed to fight by air and by sea and by land. And they vowed to fight the enemy not only by land, sea, and air and hill, but also caves, swamps, volcanic ridges. And in the ancient Hebrew book of Isaiah, a call to service cried out, "Whom shall I send?" And the answer echoed back, "Here am I, Lord, send me." We have with us this morning one of those patriots who responded to that call of duty and said, "Here am I, send me." In 1942, my friend and constituent Ed Taggart went to Guadalcanal. He served on Guadalcanal in 1942 and 1943. I learned another piece of his story just out in the lobby a few minutes ago. He finds it very difficult to hear. He contracted malaria 8 times as a consequence of his service on Guadalcanal. I'd like to ask Mr. Ed Taggart and his wife Mary if they would please stand to be acknowledged by the House of Representatives this morning. Sir. Very briefly, Mr. Taggart's greatest generation left home, they left family, they left the familiar to a place, by his own admission, that he had never heard of, and yet it was a place that he would never forget, and for some, it was a place they would never leave. In the World War II Guadalcanal Diaries novel speaks of a man from Brooklyn, New York, shot once in the leg approaching a Japanese position, shot a second time in the abdomen. A third and a fourth bullet rang out and ripped the fingers off his hand. And in the American spirit and in defense of liberty, he charged on. The same book documents hand-to-hand struggles in combat so that the battlefields were littered with men tangled with one another. Mr. Taggart has his own books that he's written on the South Pacific. But another thing struck me in closing. This was a man whose dad was serving in the South Pacific. Ed Taggart, 19 years of age, and his father in the same Pacific theater. And Ed Taggart's father was a World War I veteran. And long after the time of retirement and setting aside and letting young men take up duty's mantle, he fought with his son in the Second World War. Today, I ask you to pledge with me that we will never forget these titans who responded to duty's call, that we will never forget their bravery and their heroic sacrifice. And this morning, Ed Taggart, we thank you that you esteemed duty, honor, and country as something that was more precious than life. Thank you for serving in the United States military during the Second World War, and thank you specifically for being an artilleryman at Guadalcanal in 1942 and 1943. God bless you, Mr. Taggart.